His prison escape had dire consequences of unspeakable cruelty, and it was all because of a faulty system allowing criminals to escape unscathed and submit to their atrocious impulses. This is not an escape story featuring a smooth, cartoon-like con artist, nor is it a tale of someone who wanted freedom at all costs. This is the story of Gonzalo Lopez, a bloodthirsty ex-mafia man that evaded imprisonment by taking notice and advantage of major security lapses. Once he escaped, Lopez did what he knew best: murdered innocent people for no reason at all, just for the sake of it. Viewers' discretion is advised. It was May 12, 2022, and a Texas Department of Criminal Justice bus was making its way from the Alfred D. Hugh unit in Gatesville, Texas, toward a medical appointment in Huntsville. The ride was going to be 3 hours long. The morning was serene as it could be for 16 prisoners and 2 veteran prison officers, one which was driving the bus, all sharing the same enclosed space. Then, one of the men, a heavily tattooed Mexican prisoner named Gonzalo Lopez, started talking. His words were addressed to Michael Wages, the inmate behind Lopez. His words were bold, and in retrospect, taunting. But only a few minutes later, Lopez's intentions became somewhat clearer, at least to Wages, who was the only one really paying attention to the man. As for the guards, they were either lost in conversation or too uninterested to notice. But it happened all the same. With a few concealed and quick movements, Gonzalo Lopez slipped out of his handcuffs. Then he removed his leg irons. His movements were natural and carefree. He had planned this for a long while. The man had spent the last couple of months, weeks, and days fashioning or somehow acquiring a key. He'd known that, when the time came, he would use this key to discard his handcuffs. And on the morning of May 12, 2022, just before he was taken on the bus, he made sure to slip the key inside his mouth. A few minutes after freeing himself from the handcuffs and leg irons, Lopez produced 2 8 to 10 inch metal weapons from his pockets. Michael Wages, who was sitting right behind Gonzalo Lopez, was the only one to notice the blades. He was terrified, but what scared him more was the look in Lopez's eyes. Wages knew straight away the man was a killer, and that Lopez wouldn't let anything or anyone destroy whatever plan he'd hatched. Despite this, Lopez gave him a quick reassurance that he wasn't going to kill him. Still terrified and fearing for his life, Wages chose to keep his mouth shut and not alert the prison officers. Wages' assessment was, in fact, correct. Gonzalo Lopez was a killer with a long history of violence. His criminal history dates back to 1994, when an 18-year-old Lopez was convicted of aggravated assault, possession of marijuana, failure to stop and render aid, and unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. In 1996, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison for all these charges. In 2004, the man was involved in a high-speed police chase. After firing shots at the police, Lopez escaped by fleeing on foot. But his most gruesome crime yet, the one he was currently in prison for, was the 2005 kidnapping and murder of Jose Guadalupe Ramirez. In 2005, Gonzalo Lopez was part of the La Mana drug cartel based in Tamaulipas, Mexico. Ramirez owed the cartel $40,000, and he had to pay it back one way or another. Lopez killed Ramirez with a pickaxe before burying his body in the woods. Lopez was arrested a month later, in April 2005, and he was sentenced to life in prison for capital murder and aggravated kidnapping. Gonzalo Lopez wasn't someone to be messed with. He was as resourceful as he was gruesome. In the months before May 12, 2022, the man went on many medical trips, not because he had any serious health issues, but because he wanted to get familiar with the prison buses and the security protocols. These trips helped him make some important discoveries. First, the number of guards present on these trips was way smaller than expected. Almost half of the prison guard jobs at the Hughes unit were vacant. Because of this, the remaining guards were overworked, which made them grow increasingly lax. Lopez had noticed this laxity and used it to his advantage. That's how he knew making a key for the handcuffs and obtaining the blades would be safe. He knew the guards wouldn't bother to use the body orifice security scanner or boss chair on him. If the guards had used the device, they would have surely noticed the metallic pieces hidden in Lopez's mouth. But they failed to do so. They didn't even give him a quick pat down. After he freed himself, Gonzalo Lopez opened all of the windows he could reach inside the caged area at the front of the bus, which was reserved for high-security prisoners. Then, over the next hour, Lopez started prying up the tack welds around the square of the metal grating between the high-security prisoners and the driver. Had there been a third officer inside the bus, Lopez might have been spotted and stopped, but as such, he was free to do as he pleased. It certainly helped that the other prisoners were rooting for him. Once they realized what the man was doing, two of them started rapping rather loudly. They wanted to help him. It was around midday and the bus was now approaching the tiny town of Centerville, located halfway between Houston and Dallas. An hour and a half into the trip, Gonzalo Lopez managed to pry off a 9-inch by 18-inch square of grating. The escape was on. In an instant, Lopez stabbed the driver with one of the shanks. The bus came to an abrupt stop on Highway 7, and the two men stumbled outside fighting. But Lopez had the upper hand. He managed to snatch the driver's gun holster, but he didn't have time to figure out how to remove the weapon. Suddenly, the other officer burst out of the bus, gun in hand. The driver begged him to shoot Lopez, but Lopez was quicker. With both officers now outside, Lopez scrambled back up into the bus and began driving away. The officers started shooting, but they couldn't hit Lopez. Instead, they managed to hit one of the rear tires. Still, Lopez drove away a couple of miles down Highway 7 near Centerville. Then he crashed the bus into a ditch, but he wasn't about to get caught. Instead, he dove out of a window and took off, leaving the other prisoners fearing for their lives. A nearby police officer in a patrol car was alerted by an onlooker. But even though he was the first on the scene when the bus crashed, he saw Lopez running away. The officer failed to chase after the inmate or shoot at him. For more than an hour after Lopez got free, the guards couldn't figure out who had escaped. They thought it had been Wages, but as we know, Wages was still on the bus. As soon as Lopez was identified as the escapee, the manhunt was on. The Lone Star Fugitive Task Force, the Texas Rangers, and the U.S. Marshals all showed up to aid in the search. But hundreds of people, helicopters fitted with thermal imaging, and tracking dogs weren't enough to find the man. For 3 weeks, nobody had any idea where Lopez was. Well, at least not officially. By late May, authorities and locals alike were more or less convinced Gonzalo Lopez had already fled the area, and that searching for him was futile. But on May 31st, authorities got an interesting call about a breaking and entering on Highway 7 in Centerville. They discovered evidence that Lopez was to blame. The thief had stolen food, soda, a jacket, and bottled water, in addition to taking a shower with rainwater. Investigators examined a nearby vacation property owned by one Collins family after gathering forensic evidence to compare with the DNA of the escapee. Yet nobody informed the people that Gonzalo Lopez might still be nearby. As such, people relaxed. They thought they were safe. They thought the monster was gone. He was only getting ready to strike in a bloody, grotesque, and inhuman manner. On June 2, 2022, Gonzalo Lopez broke into a ranch owned by the Collins family in Centerville, Texas. Inside, he found 66-year-old Mark Collins and his 4 grandchildren. 8-year-old Waylon Collins, 16-year-old Carson Collins, and 11-year-old Hudson Collins. 11-year-old Bryson Collins was their cousin. Gonzalo Lopez killed them all, either by shooting or by stabbing them. After murdering the 5 members of the Collins family, Lopez stole several guns from the ranch, including an AR-15. Then he took off in the family's white pickup. The Leon County Sheriff's Office discovered that Lopez's DNA matched the burglary's DNA on June 2nd, only 2 days later. 20 minutes later, the Sheriff's Office fielded a call from Chris Collins, who said he was worried about his 3 sons and their cousin. Law enforcement officers headed to the Collins Ranch. They found the bodies inside. The white pickup had been seen heading south from San Antonio. Spike strips were laid across the highway. Lopez drove over, puncturing all his tires, but he didn't stop driving. Once he entered the city limits of Jordanton, Lopez shot at the police through the truck's window. Then he lost control of the truck, crashed into a utility pole, and finally crashed into a fence. But the fight hadn't left him. He got out of the truck and started shooting at officers. He was killed in the shootout. 7 months after Gonzalo Lopez, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice released a report showing the multiple failures that led to Lopez's escape. The report concluded the escape could have been prevented. Maybe then, Mark Collins and his 4 grandchildren would still be alive.